What's going on out here? This is Sword Fan Chick back with another video, and today we are talking about blackwashing. Yes, a particular blackwashing thing that happened, and we all know about it. It's about the casting of Halle as Ariel in The Little Mermaid. If you guys aren't familiar with Chloe and Halle, I suggest you look them up on YouTube. They are actually pretty talented, so I would recommend. So, we all know Halle got cast as Ariel by now, which came as a shock to a lot of people. And I'm pretty sure Disney picked her because she's extremely talented, she's beautiful, and she's black, so she fits the diversity quota. You know, they have that. And they probably didn't want Ariel's character to look too similar to Giselle's live action character, you know, because we all as Disney fans know that Enchanted 2 is coming out, okay? It's going to be called Disenchanted, I think. But anyway, I think Enchanted 2 is being released around the same time as The Little Mermaid. So I can kind of see why they didn't want the main characters to look the same. Of course, there are people not happy about Halle being cast as The Little Mermaid. And then there's a lot of people who are. Personally, I understand both sides of the argument. And I'm going to explain why. There are several reasons why I am uncomfortable with this, but at the same time I'm also pretty happy about this. I want to explain that I normally support any opportunity that's given for black women to play in lead roles, because it's rare, okay? It's very rare that black women get a chance to play in a lead role. Let's face it, I bet you can probably name a few movies on your fingers of black women in lead roles. Just saying. Furthermore, the original mermaid in The Little Mermaid didn't really have any specific look, so I'm not really too pressed about them casting a black girl for this role. But my fear is that this blackwashing might hurt our need for representation and diversity in the long run. You know, if you're smart enough to see it by now, Hollywood is obviously trying to fill up movies with as much diversity as possible. You know, especially Disney, because this is what sells tickets. Let's just face it, that and well-known brands. You know, people no longer have interest in a movie with a white cast because it's too common. You know, it's just too common. And most times people are going to go out and support movies that either have a great cause behind it or they're familiar with the source material. Okay, that's just the way today's society is as far as movie markets go. And overseas markets, you know, they tend to like movies with great effects and familiar concepts, but they don't have as high expectations as the American markets do. And very seldom do people go to movies anymore just because it looks good, okay? The days of the novelty of being, you know, enwrapped in a movie story is too boring for a lot of people today. And then the graphics, people are becoming more and more sensitized to the way something looks. So those things are no longer drawing in audiences. Okay, even well-known actors are not drawing in audiences. People, they see a well-known actor, it doesn't make them go to the movies. You know, it's crazy because I hear so many people say, why doesn't Disney make original movies instead of remakes? I'm so tired of remakes. But I'm pretty sure half the people requesting this probably wouldn't care to even see an original movie from Disney or any other movie company. It's very clear because there's a lot of original movies that have come out and people are not seeing them. They're not breaking the box office. Especially because it's cheaper to see it on a streaming service like Netflix or Amazon Prime. So, I don't get it. Anyway. Yes, while diversity quotas are needed for movies to get the green light these days, we are going to see more people of color being cast in these roles. So that's a plus. However, when this need for diversity fades out, what will happen to black representation in movies? I'm thinking about cause and effect here. You know, when we start allowing blackwashing, that'll leave the territory open for whitewashing in the future. And guess what? I'm pretty sure white producers are going to be using Halle as an excuse as to why whitewashing is okay. She's going to be a gaslighting example rather than, you know, a way to pave for black people. And that's what bothers me. That's what makes me a little uncomfortable with when we see blackwashing in movies, is that once it's done on one end, then they're going to think it's okay to do it on the other end. and then we'll just end up looking like a big contradiction. And that is, or big hypocrite for that matter, if you decide to be mad on this end and not be mad on that end. Then they'll end up taking the cause for representation and diversity less seriously. So I honestly feel uncomfortable about Halle being cast. But what bothers me most about this whole thing is everybody else's double standards placed on this movie from both sides of the argument. You know, from both people who don't want Halle and do want Halle, okay? I've heard some pretty bad arguments and I really want to address it. So I'm going to start with the first argument I heard against Halle being Ariel. Here's a little statement that got around the internet. The Little Mermaid is a Danish story, therefore she should be white. This is cultural appropriation. Okay, let me address this. Truth be told, many of the stories Disney has been inspired from have all had European origins, from The Lion King to The Princess and the Frog. But Disney has always changed the stories to fit their own vision. It's not unusual, and it won't be the first and last time they do this, because they want to relate to more audiences and the Americans. Second of all, Disney's version of the story takes place in the Atlantic Ocean. Denmark, home of the Danish, is near the Arctic Ocean. So Disney's version of The Little Mermaid is obviously not Danish and has better chance of being Caribbean or African than it does being white, as far as culture goes. Okay, so it makes sense that they would cast a black girl in the role of Ariel, if you really think about it, as far as from a cultural standpoint. I mean, they got whole Jamaican music in this movie. They got pretty much Greek names like Triton. I mean, there's so much culture in this movie that isn't Danish. Furthermore, this is not cultural appropriation because it was white people that produced this movie, and the money is going to white people. So the only ones benefiting are still white people. Furthermore, Halle is not taking credit for the creation of Ariel's character, neither, nor the creation of the story. So it is not cultural appropriation. Please watch my video on cultural appropriation to get the true definition of the meaning behind cultural appropriation, or at least do some research before you make this kind of statement. Here's the second statement I've heard from people who don't want Halle as Ariel in The Little Mermaid. Why didn't they just make a Princess and the Frog movie and cast a black girl in that movie instead? See, I find this statement ironic, because people are so mad that a black girl got cast as The Little Mermaid, which is a so-called European story, yet they somehow would rather the black girl be cast in The Princess and the Frog, which is also technically a European story. Listen, I can totally understand that Disney's Ariel has a nostalgic place in your heart, the red-haired white girl, but it seems contradictory to be okay with the black girl to be in The Princess and the Frog, considering she's mostly a frog in that movie, but then you're not okay with Ariel being black. You're not okay with the black girl being cast in Little Mermaid. And your excuse is that this is a Danish European story. Furthermore, The Princess and the Frog is not as popular of a movie as The Little Mermaid, so it makes sense that they would go with The Little Mermaid more than The Princess and the Frog. Also, if I'm not mistaken, again, as I've stated before, Enchanted 2 is coming out soon, probably around the same time as Little Mermaid, so I'm pretty sure they didn't want the characters to look too much alike and wanted them to get their own viewership. Which brings me to another stupid statement people have made. Number 3. What about red-headed representation? A lot of red-haired girls looked up to Ariel. First of all, black people have red hair, So why should race make a difference? Secondly, if they hired a natural blonde or brunette to play her, would you still be mad? Because most of the time they hire girls that are not even really redheads and they just dye their hair and get them a wig. Y'all know this is true. Furthermore, like I said, redheads have plenty of representation, especially in children's entertainment. Did I just mention Giselle from Enchanted? Yeah, I think I did. Whereas black kids, especially black girls, have very few positive representations. Very few. In fact, we have very few black girls as lead characters, period. So please, let's not act like redheaded people are being oppressed here. The fourth statement I've heard from people who don't want Halle to be Ariel. Disney honestly doesn't even care about diversity. They're doing this all for money. They're greedy. Well, as a company, every movie they make is for money. So I don't understand why this is even an argument. Secondly, Hollywood is now becoming interested in diversity because we, the people, have shown that is what we desire. There, companies are catering to the demographic that is most profitable. You know, it's interesting how back in the day when we had Ben Affleck playing a Mexican, he won an award for it, and no one said anything about it. Back then, people would say, that's just Hollywood. They get well-known white actors because it's more profitable, right? Interestingly enough, people don't seem to accept that now what is profitable is getting a diverse ethnicity in a movie. Anyway, the final statement I've heard from these anti-Halle fans, Disney fans, anti-Halle Disney fans, is this. People get mad when there's whitewashing, so why are people so accepting of blackwashing? I'm gonna be truthfully honest with you on this one. This is actually not a dumb statement to me because I actually agree. You know, people got mad when Storm was played by a light-skinned mixed girl. People got mad when Scarlett Johansson played Mariko Kusanagi. People got mad when white people played most of the characters in Gods of Egypt. So it does seem like there are some serious double standards when you compare the outrage. However, keep in mind that these stories that I mentioned took place in real countries where the culture was significant to the story as well as the race. In Disney's version of The Little Mermaid, it's very clear that Danish culture is not one of the biggest influences of the story, okay? But like I said, the music, the location, all have Caribbean influences and Greek influences, okay? So there's a lot going on in Disney's take on The Little Mermaid. The cultural blend is so strong that I almost can't help but see Little Mermaid as anything. Furthermore, ethnicity, race, or skin color never played a huge factor in the character's life or story in any significant way. So the comparisons between the above mentioned and The Little Mermaid are leaving out these important factors. But I do understand how it feels to be wiped out of movies and television shows. After all, white companies have been doing that to people of color for years. How could I not understand? Which is why I'm not a fan of blackwashing either. Yet so many black people and people of color are okay with Halle being cast and immediately calling people racist for being against the casting. But I kind of understand why people are upset. I mean, what's the point of the live action if you're not really authentically trying to bring it to life? Right? Let's not forget that race erasure can affect us negatively in the wrong one too. I've heard so many dumb statements defending this blackwashing move without any understanding of why this is a bad habit. Because once they start doing it for black people, they're gonna start making those waves open for white people. And they're gonna do it 10 times more for them because the people making these movies are white. So we really have to be careful accepting race erasure. We need movies for ourselves, okay? We need movies where we are the initial characters of these stories. We can't be taking handouts and hand-me-downs from already established white people or white characters, okay? It makes us look bad, it makes us look hypocritical, it makes us look contradictory, and people are going to start taking our whitewashing protests less seriously. And honestly, I've heard a lot of really bad arguments from that side too, you know, from people who think Halle should have been Ariel and everybody's racist. I've heard so many dumb arguments from them too, and I want to address their arguments as well. Here's one of the statements I've heard from a lot of people who are perfectly comfortable with Halle being Ariel. Here it is. Technically, Ariel's a mermaid, so she can be of any race, right? Let me explain this. It's true that a mermaid normally does not have any specific race. And quite frankly, as I've stated before, the original story by Hans Christian Andersen, well, it's not really what Disney is basing their Little Mermaid off of. Okay, let's keep it real. There have been a lot of alterations from the culture all the way down to the story. Okay, I mean, Ariel's supposed to turn into sea foam if we're really talking about the original Little Mermaid story. So I really do believe that she could have been anything, because there was no specific skin color ever mentioned about the Little Mermaid, nor hair color for that matter. This is why normally I'm okay with mythological creatures or non-human creatures being of various races. I'm not, pressed about it. However, let's pretend for a second if that the original Ariel was black. Okay, let's pretend that she was drawn initially as a black girl. If they suddenly made a live action movie and decided to cast a white girl in the live action movie instead of a black girl, how would you feel then? I'm pretty sure most of you wouldn't be saying, she's technically a mermaid, so she can be any race, right? Right. Well, I know I wouldn't care either way, because I know the original story is European anyway, so I wouldn't care. I know a lot of black people who would though, right? I know a lot of them who be angry and up in arms. Oh, she was originally black. I ain't going to see this movie because she was originally black. So I don't want to hear this, oh, technically she's a mermaid so she can be of any race, because if the shoe was on the other foot, you'd be just as angry and pissed off as these redheaded folk. Okay? This is why you need to be cautious about promoting this type of blackwashing if you want less whitewashing. Because they're really cut from the same cloth and they're going to lead to the same result. Let's not play dumb and act like there's no hypocrisy in regards to people's acceptance of Halle As Ariel. Next. Another dumb statement I've heard from people who just think this is great. It's good to do blackwashing. It's good that Halle's in this role. And I've heard a lot of people say this. And this is normally in response to Tiana, because I've heard a lot of people say, if Tiana was changed into a white person, wouldn't you be mad? And then here's the response that a lot of people of color will say, if they cast Tiana as white, it wouldn't make sense because Tiana's based off a real person. I heard that going around the internet. This comment made in response to people who brought up the idea that Tiana's story is based off a real person, and if they cast as white people, they'd be outraged. So here we go. I actually felt that somewhat it's a legitimate point. Disney was inspired from a real person from Tiana's backstory of working in a restaurant and all that. But I also think it's a legitimate point that if Tiana was changed into a white person, people would be mad. And to dismiss it and say, well, it would make sense. Well, first of all, if you really think about it, Tiana's story, The Princess and the Frog, was actually European before they adapted it to be black. And while Tiana's specific background was inspired from a black person, Disney can just as easily change the whole story to be like the original Princess and the Frog. Okay? Many of the Disney princess design and personalities have never been exact. And a lot of them are based off of real people, if you really want to think about it. Did you know Ariel's design was originally based off of Alyssa Milano back in the 80s? Okay, it's not like Tiana is the only person based off a real person. But Disney could just as easily change it to fit whatever it is they want to put out. Okay? Regardless, the whole Princess and the Frog story is still based off a European story, like I said. So what makes you think they wouldn't, couldn't, or shouldn't cast a white girl in the role to play her? They can easily change the location, the name of the character, the look of the character, gain new inspiration to make a new Princess and the Frog. They can change everything to fit whatever story they want. And so by allowing this loophole with Halle is really only going to make producers think it's okay to whitewash characters. Okay, we blackwashed the Little Mermaid, so what's so bad about whitewashing this character? Right? To be honest though, I wouldn't be as outraged if they cast Tiana as a white girl from Princess and the Frog, as long as the story is exactly like the original. Okay, that's just me. But I know a lot of other people would be hypocritically outraged, because to be honest, Tiana was a fraud for most of that movie anyway, so I don't really feel that was like the best representation even for us black girls. But still, people would still be outraged, and they know they'd be outraged. And this whole she based off a real person, Disney can easily go back into their European roots because the story is European and make it like the original. So I don't want to hear that. Third of all, Not second, third. I was about to say second, but it's third. The third statement I heard from a lot of people is, I don't feel bad because we've been whitewashed in the past, so now the tables have turned. Oh Lord, there's a problem with this one. This attitude, this vengeful attitude. You don't see how the game can be played against you when you think like this. When the interest in diversity dies, guess what? They're gonna go back to whitewashing. Because white people run the industry, okay? And they are gonna end up using Halle as an example as to why it's okay. So while it is true that people of color have been whitewashed time and again, it's not gonna stop thanks to blackwashing, okay? In fact, if anything, blackwashing will be just the thing they need to defend their whitewashing goals. Halle, in the end, will end up being the token blackwasher. Our cause against whitewashing will eventually be taken less seriously, as I mentioned several times in this video. And Halle is going to be that stepping stone. So I wouldn't be so excited if I were you. And then the fourth statement I've heard, which is interesting that I've heard this from people of color, because back in the day when it came to whitewashing, I heard the same thing from white people when we talked about the whitewashing. But here's another stupid statement that I've heard them say. Whatever happened to how someone acts? Whatever happened to talent rather than how someone looks? Isn't acting about how someone acts? It's funny because these are the same things people said to defend whitewashing, like when Scarlett was Monaco Kusanagi. Crazy. To put it bluntly, as I've stated in my video about whitewashing and blackwashing, what is the purpose of a live action adaptation if you're not technically planning to bring it to life? The purpose of a live action is to capture the original source material as much as possible. This is why Harry Potter will forever be the most popular live action adaptation of all time, because it captured the original story in the closest way. So when making adaptations of already beloved stories, the look is just as important as the acting. Quite frankly, I do think Halle does look similar to Ariel. You know, Ariel is a tan mermaid and Halle's a lighter skinned black girl, so it's not too far off. It would be different if Halle was dark skinned, then it would be a major contrast. But she's not. You know, she's of the same complexion sort of as Ariel is, to tell you the truth. And they can easily dye her hair red, put a wig on her like they would anybody else. I mean, there are black girls with red hair, especially in my family, so I'm not really against it. If we didn't live in such a climate where whitewashing was so profitable, I wouldn't really have a problem with this. However, I can still see how casting Halle and casting anybody this way will eventually cause the tables to turn on us as minorities. The fifth statement I've heard from people who are completely comfortable with Halle being Ariel. A lot of them have said this. There are so many white princesses already, so why be mad just because one of them gets betrayed by a black girl? To a certain degree, I agree that most of the Disney princesses are white and we hardly have any princesses of color. But the answer to this is not to blackwash an already established white character. We need to leave that in the 20th century, okay? Everybody's keep on thinking about that black Cinderella. Oh, Halle gonna be like the black Cinderella when Brandy. No, we need to leave that back in the 20th century because whitewashing has become even more prevalent since after that, okay? And people have been using movies like that as an excuse to keep doing it. The answer is really to make more original stories about black women and girls. Furthermore, as I've stated again and again, this is going to turn on us really quickly. Companies often give us our black princesses only to turn the tables and portray our characters of color as white. This normally never gives us more diversity. Never does. Instead, it just turns into a trade-off. We'll get Ariel's black, but we ain't gonna get Tiana's black, okay? Or we'll get one princess is black, but then they gonna turn around and get the other character as white. So it's not necessarily good to be too comfortable with blackwashing. And if you're going to be prepared for it to be used as a gaslighting tool. That's all I got to say on that. And then finally, these people who are definitely here for Halle being Ariel, they said this statement too. There were plenty of movies with whitewashing, yet no one said anything. This is actually false. Okay, a lot of people said a lot of things. Scarlett Johansson has been attacked several times for portraying characters of color in different identities, okay? Even recently, she came out in an interview saying, I should be able to play anybody, anything, a tree and an animal, okay? Because people have been coming at her for portraying people of color. Yet when it comes to Halle, she needs this, bro. She deserves it. We okay with that. So to someone like Scarlett, it just seems very hypocritical and contradictory. Race bending is a term specifically used to describe whitewashing. Okay, Avatar: The Last Airbender was drugged up and down the street. Okay, it got a lot of tons of backlash for having nothing but white people in it. People just sometimes act like things are the way they are and that's okay, but then they want to be a hypocrite, you know? And that's one thing that bothers me. I don't care if you love Halle being in this movie and you want her there, that's great. But don't be a hypocrite about it. The selective outrage is so annoying on both sides. And it's the same with white people. Y'all can't be over here saying Scarlett can play her if she wants to, but then be mad when Halle is being portrayed as Ariel, okay? Just pick a side and stick to it. The selective outrage needs to stop on both sides. Now the next statement I've heard from both sides of the argument, which is crazy, but I've heard a lot of people addressing the whole Ursula casting too. And both people have been saying Ursula is the one that should be played by a black woman. God, I never understood why people always portrayed Ursula as black. Must we always be the fat villainous witch? Now, I'm not a fan of blackwashing, like I said, but I do find it interesting how everyone is okay with Ursula being portrayed by a black woman, but somehow Ariel's off limits. They're both mythological creatures. They don't have a race at all. So why is it Ursula most certainly should be a black woman, but not Ariel? The original Ursula was portrayed by a white woman anyway. What I get from comments like this is two things. One, we need more diverse stories about black women because all they see is this fat stereotype of us. And two, we need better representation than what we've been getting. Next, please. Anyhow, I wouldn't be against whitewashing or blackwashing if there was an equal share of roles and if I trusted Hollywood to do it fairly. Since I don't trust Hollywood enough to equalize the acting field, I don't think it's a good idea to start blackwashing any well-known characters at this time. What I will say is Halle has a beautiful voice and more than likely got the role because her voice is probably the only one that fits when I really think about it. I also do believe that while people have plenty of characters of white origin to look up to, this will not affect them as far as representation goes, you know. So I don't think it's worth the same level of backlash that it's been getting, you know. It's not like redheaded people aren't going to have other people to look up to and other redheaded people to watch in movies. Redheaded people get opportunities all the time in Hollywood, okay? Black women, however, do not. And it's very clear. Just look at the statistics and you will see that black women hardly ever get a chance to act in movies. Now, if we talk about redheaded men, that's a different story. Because I know for a fact redheaded men don't get a lot of opportunities. But redheaded women get plenty of opportunities to act in roles if they're good at it. And there's a lot of representation for redheaded people. But I'm not going to sit here and simply act like the backlash is racism, okay? Because I do understand how it feels to feel erased. So let me know in the comment section what you think. Do you think Halle should have gotten the role? Do you think it's okay to cast a black girl as Ariel? And what do you think about Scarlett Johansson's comments? Do you think people should be able to play whatever they want? You know, does it limit the acting field when people can't be a tree or an animal or a person? You know, I personally think it's kind of odd to compare acting as a tree and animal with acting as a trans person or acting as a black person, but whatever. I have my opinions. If you guys want to know more about my opinions on blackwashing and whitewashing, go ahead and check out my channel, watch the video, and let me know what you think about that one too. All right, peace.